spot. Yeah, I would do. I'll just Right, but I guess if you take the boats now,
this would take it off.
Yeah. But you can't stop it on this one.
How do you get it?
Okay, so just take the boats
staff, like mostly.
I'm with you.
Okay. Well, hi guys, welcome. Yes, it's staff mostly. Just a friendly reminder, if y'all could please keep everything off the stage at all times. Feed, drinks, personal belongings. I don't think he's with the staff.
I am the debater,
Okay.
and I just need this on the stage.
I'm just saying it. You're here with them, it's okay. You do whatever you want. I meant mostly for my friend right here. Thank you so much. Debate away, okay? Thank you.
All right. Good evening. Good evening, New York City. My name is Casey Gibbon. I am the president and executive director of Young Voices. And we are very pleased to welcome you to our Young Voices debate. This is our 14th debate and our 7th debate in person in New York City. And I'm pleased to say that it's the first one we've actually sold out. Yes. I see there's still some empty seats, so I assume maybe the rain scared some people away, or maybe people will shuffle in, but I'm expecting a pretty full house tonight, so I hope you'll enjoy this. And please stick around afterwards as well. We're going to have a reception downstairs, and first drink is on Young Voices, so you should get your money back. Yeah, absolutely. Young Voices, for those of you who are not aware, is a nonprofit PR firm for libertarian and conservative students and young professionals aged 18 to 35. We help them get their first media hits in terms of op-eds, radio, TV. We help them speak to high schools and colleges. We help them build their brands online, get their first jobs, all different sorts of stuff. So if you are a young professional and this sounds appealing to you and you want to enter the world of ideas, whether that be as a policy analyst, a journalist, an academic, please check us out. Find me at the reception, and our URL is right behind me, joinyv.org. All right, well, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce you to the MC of the evening, Hekmat Abu Qadir. Hekmat is the moderator. Yeah, let's give Hekmat a round. He's a known quantity by now. Hekmat is the moderator and director of Young Voices Debates. He comes to us with experience from the United Nations Department of Peacebuilding and Political Affairs and the Quincy Institute. Hekmat has a BA from Boston College and is currently pursuing a graduate degree in public policy at Yale. Please welcome the Master of Ceremonies, Hekmat.
Thank you very much, Casey. Thank you all for coming here for this amazingly timely debate that we're about to have. The rules are as follows for an Oxford-style debate. At the beginning, we will ask you all to take out your phones, scan a QR code, and give us your opinion on the resolution at hand. The United States should intervene militarily in Venezuela. whether you agree, disagree, or are undecided on the resolution at hand. Then we will hear opening statements. We have a 1 versus 2 set up today, so you'll hear 15 minutes versus 7.5 both ways for the opposition and the proposition. Then you'll hear rebuttals. Then it will be your chance to ask questions to all three debaters on stage and virtually, and get your voices heard in this important debate. And then after that, once that's done, we will get the closing remarks from all three debaters, and you'll get to vote once more. And the side that switches more of the voters, more of the audience to their position wins the debate. So without further ado, let me take my seat and introduce you to the three debaters that we have today. First, we have already on the virtual stage, Orlando Avendano. Thank you for joining us, Orlando. Orlando is a Venezuelan journalist currently completing a master's degree in philosophy. He is a senior editor at the US-based outlet VOZ Media, which focuses on conservative Hispanic audiences. He serves on the International Advisory Council of Spain's Fundazione Disenso. Avendano has written extensively about Venezuela, which has led to severe persecution by Nicolas Maduro's regime. He is the subject of an arrest warrant and is therefore living in exile. He will be our second speaker for the proposition. Our first speaker for the proposition will be Germania Rodriguez Paleo. Germania, if you can please join us on the stage. Germania is a Venezuelan American journalist and commentator who has written about the Venezuelan crisis for the Independent and Caracas Chronicle, among other publications. After a decade working as a news reporter for outlets including the Daily Mail, she left mainstream media to focus on left-wing authoritarian populism around the world, particularly Venezuela and Latin America. Thank you, Germania, for being on the stage. And then for the opposition, taking the opposing position on the resolution at hand, we have Max Blumenthal. Max, please join the stage. Max is the founder and the editor for The Gray Zone, an independent US-based publication, and the author of several books such as Republican Gomorrah, Goliath, and The Management of Savagery. Thank you all three for being here for this incredibly timely debate. We really appreciate your time, and your intellectual prowess will be on stage today, and I hope we'll teach these people a little bit more about the important topic at hand. So without further ado, I will introduce the Germania for your opening statement. You have 7.5 minutes. You can take the podium.
Hello. I want to thank Young Voices for having me. I haven't really done this since high school, so.
Sorry, Germania. Sorry, I have to interrupt you. We did not do the vote.
I thought so.
Germania, please say so. All right, folks, please take out your phones, and those watching online, you can take a screenshot and then you go on your gallery app and just scan this QR code. Let me make sure I'm not in the way. Scan your QR code and let us know what you think about the resolution at hand. And it reads the following. The U.S. should militarily intervene in Venezuela. Very straightforward. So just take out your phones, scan the QR code. Max,
we cannot scan the quote.
Can you
move a bit?
Can you move slightly to the left?
It's behind you.
You want me on the far left? So folks, please, at this point, let me see a show of hands if you haven't voted yet. Okay? Yeah, get those phones out. And for those of you watching online, you don't have to do it this immediate instant. You can scroll back, you can go back in the actual live video, and you can find the QR code again to vote if you haven't been able to. Let me get a gauge from the room. Have we been able to all vote?
Yeah.
Show of hand if you haven't. Excellent. All right, we're all good. Germania, once more, please take it away. You have 7.5 minutes.
So as I was saying, I am not a master debater, but I will try my best to follow this format. The resolution today is the U.S. should militarily intervene in Venezuela. Now, I'm not here to support a full-on Afghanistan-style invasion of my country. I don't believe that's necessary, as Venezuela has a history with democracy and citizens with Western values. Now, that's not to say that U.S. military action in Venezuela would be a simple fix. There's no simple fix against modern dictatorships, which are elected into office in power and stay in power forever with the help of powerful dictators around the world and first world propagandists. That is to say, Venezuela has already been invaded by Cuba, Iran, and Russia. I am not a warmonger or a CIA shill, as a lot of people describe people like me. This is not about oil, and Venezuelans are not noble savages who need the CIA to tell them to want freedom. I am a Venezuelan American who has already seen my home country's democracy fall to tyrannical foreign influence, and I believe that a Russia and Iran-backed dictatorship in our hemisphere is a threat not only to the United States, but to the liberal world order. In fact, the US should have taken action long ago to stop Cuban-style tyranny in this hemisphere, and we are currently paying the price for allowing the Cuban tragedy to spread in our region. Today, Americans wonder how groups such as Tren de Aragua are showing up at their doorstep, but they refuse to connect how a brutal dictatorship just 3 hours from Miami might have something to do with the kind of people that reaching their towns. Which brings me to a major reason the US needs to act. The Chavista regime has created the largest displacement crisis in the history of the Western Hemisphere. 8 million people have left Venezuela since 2014, when the crisis reached its peak. Think about that. This country is supposedly not at war. Venezuela has turned into a bleeding wound in the middle of the region, exporting not only poverty and hunger, but also the criminality that breeds under 21st century socialism, where it's normal to kill for a pair of shoes. The kind of crime Venezuelan migrants have brought to the US and other countries is not something that those who have democracy privilege are used to seeing. There's a reason for that. And no, US sanctions are not to blame for the migrant crisis. The crisis in Venezuela began long before the package of economic sanctions against the oil industry, which happened in August of 2019. Also, Chevron has never stopped buying Venezuelan oil. The reality is that the US has not gone after Maduro because of Venezuela's oil. From the time of George W. Bush, who could not afford to lose that oil as he went into war in the Middle East. In fact, US oil companies have been and remain Chavismo's biggest financier. Both Democratic and Republican administrations have ignored first Fidel Castro, then Hugo Chavez. The consequence of this has been 8 million refugees and a criminal organization offering a safe haven for drug traffickers, terrorists, and anyone looking to destroy liberal democracies. Unlike recent US governments, China, Russia, Iran, Cuba understood the geopolitical importance of having Venezuela as a base. These powers have already invaded Venezuela. In fact, it is Cuba's intelligence services who are today advising Maduro and protecting him. Meanwhile, Iran's relationship with Chavismo is well documented. Aside from offering its prime territory, Venezuela supplies Iran with heavy oil and fuel, also with uranium, which they need for their nuclear weapons. Notably, Iran planned to kidnap an Iranian journalist from her home in Brooklyn and take her in a boat to Venezuela, where the Iranian regime could do whatever it wanted with her. Iran had also been planning the assassination of Mike Pompeo and John Bolton on US soil. The FBI said an Iranian spy who was looking for US allies to kill US officials was operating from Venezuela.
Let's pipe it down, folks. Let's uninterrupt the opening statement.
The Venezuelan regime itself has gone after countless dissidents abroad, including recently in Colombia, where 2 young exiled Venezuelans were shot and nearly killed as they exited their home. At least 1 dissident was brutally killed by Tren de Aragua members acting on Maduro's orders in Chile. This is according to Chile's left-wing president, Gabriel Boric. Meanwhile, Moscow began transporting strategic bomber aircraft capable of carrying nuclear weapons to Venezuela as far back as 2018. Putin has also sent Russian troops to Venezuela to suppress protests and provide intelligence. Recently, the Wall Street Journal reported Russia sent a general to advise Maduro forces as the US approaches. Now, I would like to approach the other side's strongest arguments. Perhaps the strongest is that the US should not engage in forever wars or nation building because it failed in places like Afghanistan or Libya. It's telling that those who push this argument compare Venezuela, a nation with Western values and democratic history, to nations in the Middle East, instead of closer examples of countries with democratic histories such as Colombia, Panama, or even Germany. I don't claim that a U.S. operation would come at no cost to the U.S., but I argue the cost of not doing it will be much higher in the long run. Again, just look at how the Cuban dictatorship has tripled in the region, spreading to Venezuela and to Nicaragua. Venezuelans overwhelmingly voted to remove Maduro last year. Not only did they vote, but they stayed at the voting booths and served as witnesses, making the Chavista electoral fraud so obvious that even Maduro's allies in Colombia and Brazil could not support it. Electoral witnesses who make sure to document this fraud were then hunted in something the regime called Operation Knock Knock, and most had to flee Venezuela if they weren't in prison before getting the chance to. To say the fight for Venezuelan democracy is a US-led idea is an insult to the millions of Venezuelans who have protested, been jailed, and exiled in the name of freedom. Peace is not just a lack of fighting, but the presence of qualities like justice, human rights, and the ability to improve your life with hard work. It is not pro-peace to condemn Venezuela to a future like that of Cuba. We also want to stop our tragedy from going into another nation, the way Cubans once warned us of our fate. How much will the US let the enemies of democracy and Western values advance in our hemisphere? The time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Germania, for your opening statement. Now, Orlando, please take it away. You have 7.5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Sorry, can you turn off the microphone from so I don't hear me?
He has an echo.
Let me know when that's done, so I'll start with my opening statement.
Can you raise it?
Go ahead now.
Okay. Yeah, now I'm here. Well, thank you very much, Hackman, for the invitation, for the opportunity to be here. I want to begin by addressing what is, without question, the central issue here. Is the Venezuelan government actually a drug cartel? Let's go to the facts. In 2006, a Venezuelan plane was detained in Mexico with 5 tons of cocaine on board. Investigations carried out both in Mexico and by the DEA concluded that Venezuela's main airport, Maiquetía, was being used as a major drug trafficking corridor. In 2011, a major drug lord, Khalid Maclet, was arrested in Colombia. From there, Maclet revealed that he had paid millions of dollars to high-ranking Venezuelan military officers so he could operate freely. The military was complicit. According to Maclet's own testimony, Hugo Chávez's government had authorized him to operate inside Venezuela without interference. In 2012, a Chavista Supreme Court Justice, Eladio Aponte, defected and began cooperating with the DEA. Aponte stated that Chavez personally authorized the development of drug operations inside Venezuela. He also revealed, according to a Reuters report, that the Chavista regime had corrupted the courts and the judiciary to ensure that no judge would ever persecute drug trafficking. In 2015, a former Hugo Chávez bodyguard, Leancy Salazar, fled to the United States and began cooperating with the DEA. His testimony was devastating. He revealed that the entire Venezuelan military structure is involved in drug trafficking and that the organization is known as the Cartel of the Suns, El Cartel de los Soles, referring to the insignia worn by the Venezuelan generals as the stars in the United States. Salazar also revealed that under Maduro, the regime used the state-owned oil company, PDVSA, in Maiquetía airport and specifically the presidential grant to ship cocaine to the United States and to Europe. That same year, two nephews of Nicolas Maduro were arrested by the DEA. They were caught on video testing cocaine, transporting it, and planning to smuggle 500 tons of cocaine into the United States. And the testimonies have kept piling up. We have testimony from General Cliver Alcalá, who admitted that when he was the commander of the armed forces, he himself was responsible for overseeing drug shipments. And we have the testimony of Hugo Carvajal, El Pollos, who was Chavez and Maduro's intelligence chief, who stated that he served as the liaison between the FARC and the Venezuelan regimes to drug trafficking. So yes, Venezuela is governed by the drug cartel. And it is a cartel that spreads instability across the region, as we've seen in Argentina, Chile in 2019, and Colombia also in 2019. That strengthens organized crime structures like Tren de Aragua, which Germania just mentioned, that it killed a dissident in Chile, and that was denounced by the government of Chile, which is not a far-right government. Also, the regime has opened the door for terrorist groups such as Hezbollah to operate freely throughout the hemisphere, as Politico, a few years ago, revealed in a detailed investigation. If the United States ignores this, it will be a profound disrespect to the Americans who elected President Trump to work for safety and it's a matter of U.S. national security. Now, after 26 years of a ruthless dictatorship, a regime that has expelled more than 10% of its population, that kills dissidents, that holds more than 1,000 political prisoners, that kidnaps and tortures them, and that has stolen elections repeatedly, there are no alternatives left. Venezuelans have tried everything to remove this regime, and the United States.
Alright folks, we apologize for this. It seems like we have a connection error. We'll just continue as is, and we'll jump straight into Max's opening statement. Max, let's just cut it short. You have 10 minutes rather than 15.
No, I don't.
Take the podium, please.
Right, but
That doesn't make sense in terms of
I
time.
think I lost.
No, they took up
here.
over 12 minutes. Okay, we can have 12 minutes for your opening statement.
Give him the rest of his time if he's back.
Orlando, can you hear us?
I think he wants us to bomb.
Orlando, can you hear us? It's fine. All right, take it away. You have 12 minutes. And 30 seconds. Right. Apologies for the disruptions, folks. We'll continue between Hermania and Max.
Great. Small. One reset just so I have my time.
All right, time begins now. Thank you to Young Voices. I think we should rename this Middle-Aged Voices because of my participation. I take it as a huge compliment to be included here. I was debating two people. I said they could give me 1,000 people to debate, but I don't know if we can find 1,000 people who see Trump as their great orange hope and actually support his freedom bombs. I mean, this is a pretty unpopular war, and the war is already going on. This is already a criminal war taking place in the Caribbean that continues 20 years of U.S. crimes against Venezuela. It already is a forever war. So a YouGov poll from November 24th found that only 13% of Americans believe Venezuela is a major threat. And 70% of the public opposes military strikes, which is it's wild to me. I didn't know 13% of the American public were defense contractors and constituents of Maria Elvira Salazar. but it's not very many Americans. The top JAG officer for Southcom that's supposed to carry out this war has condemned the strikes as illegal, including the one in which Pete Hegseth, the Pentagon's DUI hire, directed aircraft to kill men as they were in the water. We don't even know who they are. These are Venezuelan civilians. These are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. These are citizens of Colombia. And they're being murdered on the high seas because of a phony narco-terrorist designation designed to invalidate the Constitution, prevent Congress from having a vote, prevent us from even having any debate, and to whip the public into a kind of hysteria that's not working anymore. So let's have a referendum. Let's have a national referendum. That would be the most democratic thing to do. Do you agree? National referendum. No. They don't want to go to Congress. They don't want a national referendum. Orlando Avendano is speaking to us from Spain, telling our country what to do. I don't even know if he's an American. I should call him Orlando Extranjero. I mean, this is absurd. I'm sick of listening to US-backed exile groups getting us into crazy wars from Libya to Syria, where we brought out an al-Qaeda dictatorship to power, destroyed the Sahel through Libya, and we're basically in a war with Russia. So we need to have a debate. The debate needs to be much bigger than this. And most Americans, honestly, they don't care about what's happening in Venezuela. They're more mad about having to spend $20 billion to bail out the economic fraudster Javier Milei in Argentina. They're more pissed off about the fact that more Americans are in debt now than ever before. And that's not socialism. This is life under capitalism, or what you call democratic privilege. We need to care about what's happening in this country. And today I'm standing with the American majority. And I'm taking inspiration today from an obscure young congressman who stood up before the pro-slavery President Polk and filed a series of spot amendments against one of the first major US criminal wars against Mexico when it stole California, Texas, Nevada, Arizona, over 500,000 square miles from Mexico. And the spot amendments demanded to know where combat was taking place, proving the lie that Mexico was not invading the United States. It was the other way around. That young congressman who inspires me is Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
And you know, the opposition represents an American tradition too. It's the tradition of Theodore Roosevelt, the man who stole Panama from Colombia, who said the expansion of the peoples of white or European blood during the past 4 centuries has been fraught with lasting benefit to most of the peoples already dwelling in the lands over which the expansion took place. That's why they're appealing to Trump and his government to save them and liberate them. And most Venezuelans, while they may or may not like Maduro or be Chavistas, do not agree with them, according to a data analysis poll from an independent polling firm on November 12th. Only 23% of Venezuelans support the US dropping freedom bombs on their country. Only 20% believe bombing will improve the situation. They know. And the same amount, 1 out of 5, support being sanctioned. I don't know, why don't they want to have medical supplies embargoed? Why don't they want to be starved? Why don't they appreciate how we've been destroying their oil sector and turning them into migrants since 2014? It wasn't 2019 when the sanctions began. They began under Obama. They think that they, you know, so who's behind this war? Why are we doing this? Who really wants this? This war is the product of a fifth column in our country that exists in South Florida that does not actually care about the reality or the lives of actual, real Americans who are struggling against the debt crisis that we're in. The only thing they care about is whether the US is willing to act as an aircraft carrier to restore the control of their oligarchic class element over the Latin countries that they aim to exploit. And for us to accept as many poor migrants as possible when the blowback comes from their invasions. And there will be more blowback. They have supported this fifth column in South Florida, led by figures like Marco Rubio and Maria Elvira Salazar, have supported sanctions for years and years that have cost tens of thousands of Venezuelan lives. In just the first 2 years of sanctions, according to the Center for Economic and Policy Research, study by Jeffrey Sachs and Mark Weisbrot found that sanctions increased Venezuelan mortality rates by 30%. Francisco Rodriguez produced the most comprehensive study on the effect of U.S. sanctions on Venezuela. It's in my very close colleague's book, Corporate Coup, which I suggest you all get for more details on this, showing how the oil sector was obliterated. Yes, the economy was poorly managed, Rodriguez, who is an opposition figure, said, but its oil sector was not collapsing, and nobody, no macroeconomic analyst, no oil sector analyst predicted something remotely resembling the type of collapse that we saw. Sanctions were essentially a surgical strike directed at Venezuela's oil sector, and it produced a massive wave of migration, including Tren de Aragua, gangs who were welcomed and controlled in the United States by the opposition network of Leopoldo Lopez and the convicted criminal Gilbert Caro. And we have to keep asking why they keep getting released after they commit crimes in our country, including the brother of the killer of Lake and Riley who attacked 2 Border Patrol officers. We need to investigate that. We need to have a real investigation into what the hell was going on at the height of Trump's campaign in 2024, and if these figures have strictly protect in their files. So they supported the destruction of their country's economy. They supported the military coup in 2002. They supported the military coup in 2019. Can you imagine if I did that in this country? If I called on Russia and China to support starving my fellow Americans, and I supported violent riots like La Salida in 2014, which saw Afro-Venezuelans burned alive in Leopoldo Lopez's district, if I supported military coups in my country, if I called on Russia and China to bomb Donald Trump or Joe Biden, I can't stand Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I bet many of you feel the same way. They're warmongers, they're repressive in our own country, they abuse people, but I would never call on a foreign country to bomb them because that would be treason, and Americans would hate me across the board. And what they are doing, the opposition is doing, is treason to Venezuela, and they're playing with the lives of common people. This war is an insult to our intelligence. I mean, you really have to have the IQ of a toaster oven to believe the official lie that Venezuela is the basis of the drug trade, and that these boats, these tiny little boats, which often have 11 people on them, are bringing fentanyl into our country. They can't even reach us. These boats cannot even reach us. Venezuela doesn't produce fentanyl. It doesn't produce cocaine. And I don't doubt that there are corrupt generals who ship drugs. Also, those who are trying to be flipped by the CIA and DEA, like Pollo Carvajal, who wanted to get out of trouble. But these are the facts. I mean, this is the 2025 United Nations Drug and Crime Office report showing you the shipment routes, and they're all coming from the West Coast from U.S. puppet governments like the government of Ecuador under Danielle Noboa. Look up right now. Google Bonita Shipping, Cocaine, Europe. Just do it. Who is the head of Bonita Shipping? It's our puppet who Kristi Noem just went down to visit, Danielle Noboa, who showed up in his blue Porsche and during a failed vote to bring 4 U.S. military bases into his country. He's the big source of drugs into this country. Look at that. The ones from Venezuela. Look at the line from Venezuela. It's going to Zelensky. And even if it was the case, it doesn't justify destroying their country through a Libya-style intervention. The U.S. has no credibility on the war on drugs. We know that from the amount of cocaine that was brought into our country through the Cocaine Import Agency, also known as the CIA, which founded the Cartel of the Suns. The founder of the Cartel of the Suns is the CIA. This is reported by the New York Times. It's not funny.
All the CIA, yeah.
Let's keep the back and forth until we get to the rebuttals. Until we get to the rebuttals.
Okay, I want that 15. I want 15 seconds in the last few this was reported by 60 Minutes, by Mike Wallace, and by the New York Times in 1990. The Cartel of the Suns was founded by the CIA using its main contact, General Ramon Davila Guillen. and the patch that he wore was the symbol of the Cartel of the Suns, and it has not existed since. And this is the justification for William Barr, Attorney General, and the former CIA officer who pardoned all of the Iran-Contra war criminals who shipped so much cocaine into this country in order to fund their black operations. That is the justification for this narco-terrorist designation and this whole phony war, which will turn Venezuela into a Libya in the Western Hemisphere. That's my opinion. That's the opinion of Douglas Farah, who is a neoconservative intelligence asset who has produced report after report pushing regime change in Venezuela for intelligence-aligned think tanks like the Institute for National Security Studies. He said that if the U.S. intervenes in Venezuela, there will be a conflict without end, and there will be no way of stopping it. The real cartels will start to infiltrate Venezuela. Deep consolidation of cartel control. You will see a new wave of migration, and you know what? They'll be sold out by the same Venezuelan opposition, Maria Corina Machado, that supported Trump torturing Venezuelan migrants in the CCOT prison. The same Venezuelan opposition that called on Benjamin Netanyahu's apartheid Israel to intervene in Venezuela. The opposition has no credibility on this issue. The U.S. has no credibility on the war on drugs. The American people are against this war, and the Venezuelan people are against this war. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both for your opening statements. Hermione, you can have your rebuttal now.
How long do I have?
Uh,
I
let's
didn't know I
have-
was in a 10-key conference. I
Let's-
apologize.
Let's have a 5-minute opening statement. 5-minute.
I didn't insult you.
5-minute rebuttal.
5-minute.
Yes.
Would you like to?
Yes, you did. You have been.
Let her finish her
I
rebuttal.
didn't call you names.
Let's finish her rebuttals without back and forth until we get to the Q&A. All right, Max, put that down.
Okay, where do I start? I think.
5 minutes. He will be giving you a time sequence.
Okay. I think it's interesting that it's always Max Blumenthal or the gray zone people who are always the ones opposing any sort of action in Venezuela and supporting Maduro. They can never find an actual Venezuelan to stand there and do what he's doing. So that's a food for thought. Okay.
Please keep the commentary for the Q&A section.
Americans don't support an invasion. That is the only true thing that I heard Max saying throughout the whole thing. That is true. They don't support it. Americans have become increasingly isolationist. This is because of propagandists like the gray zone. Foreign powers like Iran and Russia cannot defeat the U.S. by military force. So they have done so by paying propagandists to spread these ideas. I mean, they have their tools. He has talked from Mexico to Colombia to 60 Minutes in the 60s. This is what they do. They want to talk about Libya. They want to talk about Iraq. They do not want to talk about the details about actual Venezuela. It's interesting. He believes the United Nations about the drugs, but he doesn't care about the United Nations report of the human rights abuses, the disappeared people, the exiled people, the jailed people in Venezuela. So this is what they do. They pick and choose what they like. He says the oil sector was destroyed. Oh, let me get this one, because it's a major propaganda point that they repeat. They like to say that sanctions against the oil industry started in 2014. That's a total lie. Those were individual sanctions against people who stole billions from the Venezuelan state and promote outlets like Max to defend them. What else? Oh, the oil sector was also destroyed by corruption. It was not destroyed when Chavez fired everyone who opposed him and replaced them with his allies. That had nothing to do with it. What else? The crowd laughed at the U.S. He said he would be accused of treason if he was asking for a coup, but everyone here just laughed at the idea or cheered for the idea of Iran assassinating Mike Pompeo. I think that shows how successful countries like Iran and Russia have been in moving the narrative. The Venezuelan community is very familiar with Max's points. He's the one person, he goes on Piers Morgan to fight Venezuelans, to bring U.S. issues into our battle. He says this is about the opposition is fascist, Israel, Palestine, racism. Venezuela is not the United States. The boxes that you want to put our issues in are just not appropriate. Max has been to Venezuela a lot. He has partied with Maduro. He has pictures with him. No, you have pictures with Maduro? You haven't gone to Venezuela?
She's asking me a question.
I would love for him to respond.
We'll get to interview him.
Okay, so that's the relationship there. I think that proves it. What else can he says Venezuelans oppose an intervention. Again, he's citing a polling that was done inside Venezuela. Now, it is really hard to debate people who live in a different reality and who believe that the good guys of the world are Putin, Iran, China, because I believe the good guys of the world, we're not perfect, but I think the only kind of benevolent empire is the U.S. And that is, yes, I do think that. I do believe that. I know he likes Russia, he likes China. I prefer the United States. So, in Venezuela, people are not free to say anything because it's a dictatorship. That's where we start. If we don't agree on that premise, if we think that all the problems that go on in Venezuela are because of the US, you're being racist. And you are promoting the idea that we are noble savages who need the CIA to tell us to have the privileges that Max and his friends enjoy here in the United States. Because they like to promote Russia, they like to promote Iran, they like to support Maduro, but guess where they live? They like capitalism, and that's the bottom line of it.
Thank you very much for your rebuttal, Hermania. 5 minutes max for your rebuttal, and please no commentary. We'll get to it during the Q&A and the back and forth. Take it away, Max. 5 minutes. It's your time.
Well, I don't know how convincing it is to insult everyone and accuse them of being controlled by gamma rays from the Kremlin and from Tehran, or to call them racists. It was a very condescending rant, and you're not going to be able to convince Americans to wage war on behalf of your oligarchic Venezuelan class that way. I think you're going to have to meet them where they are. I know she didn't say that. I'm saying that. I'm saying that. And, we need to talk about what they want. What does the Venezuelan opposition want? The Venezuelan opposition is led by Maria Corina Machado, who is a figure who has promised enormous amounts of exploitation of Venezuela's raw minerals and oil in exchange for these billionaire Trump cronies like Elon Musk supporting her campaign. Why do you think Elon Musk is juicing the otherwise unengaged with accounts of Hermania and Orlando in your For You tab constantly? He wants the lithium. As he said, we'll coup whoever we want. And here's what Maria Corina Machado, the Nobel War Prize winner, who will be joined in Oslo by the former lobbyist for the blood-stained Peruvian security minister, Vladimir Montesinos, Maria Elvira Salazar, had to say, we will open Venezuela for foreign investment. I am talking about a $1.7 trillion opportunity, not only in oil and gas. I mean, she said it with wild, crazed eyes, which is huge. We will open midstream, upstream, downstream to all companies, but also in mining, in gold, in infrastructure, power. She is just basically offering Trump cronies the open veins of Venezuela for them to parasitically suck out all the resources.
Please keep it to the questions.
I know it's hard to come out of your bubble sometimes and listen to the perspective of people who have been witnessing. Listen
Keep it to the questions, please.
But this is the problem. That's why you think everyone's on your side. Now they're rejecting what you're having to say. Maria Elvira Salazar herself, who was seeking $100,000 to pay Montesinos' legal fees, big promoter of human rights, said that it's all about oil in an interview on Fox News, that it will be a free run on Venezuela's oil sector. They're going to privatize the PDVSA oil sector that was used under Chavez and Maduro to fund social programs and which is now under sanctions. She says that Venezuela is giving uranium to Hamas. She says Venezuela is giving uranium to Iran. She says Venezuela is giving uranium to North Korea and Cuba and Nicaragua. And you're saying facts? I mean, how can you, do you have any shame? Do you understand that everyone laughs at this? Nobody believes that Venezuela is giving uranium to Hamas. But that's how desperate these arguments are. And it's also about the threat of an independent example. Venezuela cannot be allowed to succeed.
Otherwise, it will spread its model elsewhere of choosing multilateral allies, forging a multipolar world, using its resources not to enrich Trump's corrupt cronies in the most corrupt administration in US history, but to pay for cooperativos, people who didn't exist anymore, who were in the shadows before Chavez. This is what Henry Kissinger said when he was supporting the criminal US dirty wars in Central America that killed hundreds of thousands of people, saw the rape and killing of Jesuit priests preaching liberation theology, and caused a massive migration crisis and started to fuel our gang problem in the United States. He said, if we cannot manage Central America, it will be impossible to convince threatened nations in the Persian Gulf and in other places that we know how to manage the global equilibrium. And the managers will be Hermania, or maybe the press secretary. Hermania, who volunteered for Israeli army service on October 9th. And wants to preach to us about human rights. And I have some questions about how military service works in Israel. DMs are open if you can help. This is 2 days after October 7th, 2023, as part of a series of statements expressing solidarity with Israel's Holocaust regime. The entire Venezuelan opposition supports genocidal Israel. As Maria Corina Machado said, Venezuela's struggle is Israel's struggle. They have no credibility on human rights. All right, well, did you get any DM?
Max, because this was a direct question, would you like to address
Yes.
this?
He's freaking lying. I am a journalist and I was looking to speak to people in the IDF for a report that I was working on. This is what these people do. He's talking about Peru, Montesinos. This is how disrespectful they are of what's going on in Venezuela. This is clearly, any journalist would know, DMs are open if you can help. This is but this is what they do. He had it right in hand.
We're going to go to the Q&A now. We're going to go to the Q&A.
I'm not talking about Israel here. This is what you do. I'm talking about Venezuela. Do you understand that?
Did you support can you be ready to control audio accordingly? Thank you. All right, now, we'll open it up for the Q&A. I'm glad this is a very charged topic. It has to be. We're like on the brink of war, so we need to have this important debate. Casey Givens, the CEO of Young Voices, claps. Casey will be handing the microphone to people, starting with Gene Epstein, the founder and director of the Soho Forum Debates.
First, can I lay down the law a little bit? It seems like we have a very animated crowd, so you please, your question must be a question, not, you can't go on. And I reserve the right to take back the mic. The first question goes to Gene Epstein of the Soho Forum.
A question for Max. Max, just let me set you up by recommending to everyone your frequent appearances with Judge Napolitano on Judging Freedom. I happen to agree with you that the Trump administration should leave Venezuela alone, just like the Bushes should have left Iraq. I think Max is a little distracted there, so the Bushes should have left Iraq alone, even though Saddam Hussein was a bad actor. But because I regard you as an important public intellectual, I just want to put you in the hot seat about the fact that seemingly every reputable monitor of human rights has condemned the Maduro regime for crimes against humanity. I only want to say what Human Rights Watch, but Amnesty International's May 29 report published 2 months before your meeting with Maduro. It's called Hunger for Justice, Crimes Against Humanity in Venezuela, concluded that acts like selective extrajudicial executions, arbitrary detentions, and excessive use of force by Maduro's government since at least 2017 formed a systematic repression amounting to crimes against humanity. Now I mentioned that one because that was 2 months before you met with Maduro and said that his fight is yours. No, I put it to you that whatever else a leader does, if he commits crimes against humanity, you don't want to take that sword from him and smilingly posed with him. That seems to me beneath you as a public intellectual. That was 6 years ago, so maybe you feel differently about that now. That's my question.
Great question. It doesn't. First of all, it doesn't address the resolution at all, which is should we bomb Venezuela? Should we invade Venezuela? Should we be carrying out criminal massacres of Venezuelan citizens in the Caribbean? Second of all, I interviewed Nicolas Maduro. I asked critical questions. I interviewed him. I was acting in a journalistic capacity, and I got access.
We said we are engaged in the same battle.
I did not say we were engaged. That's not even the language I used. I don't even know where you got that.
Spanish, that's what you said. It's on video.
Well, in any case, let's assume that he did commit that. Of course, Venezuela has committed human rights abuses. Of course, That's what governments do. And the human rights industrial complex has been targeting Venezuela for years. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, they have been targeting all the targets of the United States and have been funded and working alongside U.S. intelligence, funded by the Open Society Foundations, whose director has called for regime change from Syria to China to Venezuela. Now, we all have different opinions and experiences with these countries, but it doesn't justify regime change. And what I'm saying is the consequences of regime change through either arming proxies, like jihadist proxies like we armed in Libya and Syria, or through military intervention will cause worse human rights abuses. And Orlando, who was actually just debating, and I wish he were still here, was actually tweeting photos of a hospital in Caracas, the Simon Bolivar Clinic, where he says Maduro is hiding, suggesting, along with many US neocons, that it should be bombed. Does anything justify bombing a hospital? They want to Gazify Venezuela in order to restore power, and it starts with bombing hospitals. It starts with bombing people in the sea. I am an American. This is my government, and I am allowed to call on my government to stop committing these crimes, to start listening to us, to start going to Congress to have these debates, to do a war powers resolution, to actually be democratic. And we haven't even talked about the human rights abuses that we experience in our own country. Should we be bombed because George W. Bush stole the 2000 election? I mean, it would have saved a lot of lives in Iraq, but I would have opposed it. It might have stopped 9/11, but I would have opposed it. Should we be bombed because Trump pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez, who sent over 500 tons of cocaine to the United States, working with Los Cachiros and Chapo Guzman, who funded his campaigns? Should we be bombed because the Sackler family's name is on art galleries across the country in Washington? Should we bomb the art galleries? They're the ones who've been killing millions of Americans and killing and poisoning our country, and they're running free because that's what our system allows. And I can go on, but I am an American, and my job when I go to a place like Venezuela or Syria, where you know how the Syrian Christian community has suffered under this Al-Qaeda government, is to show Americans the other side and to build bridges to the figures who are falsely demonized by our media, which does nothing but manufacture consent for war. All right, thank you, Max. Question, and then we have many people who want to ask questions. I'll ask you both to keep your responses brief.
No, all I will say is that the resolution is should the U.S. engage in military action, not the specifics or bombing, killing children, turning it into Gaza. But I know Gaza is where we must take everything back to. I understand that's part of the script. It's done around the world by people like yourself. All I want to say is that question of whether the U.S. should militarily intervene in Venezuela is important. I'm also an American citizen, and it is a valid question for Americans to say, no, we shouldn't. However, this debate is not an honest one because we are speaking to someone who supports Maduro, thinks that is his mission, goes to Venezuela to defend him, and has the disrespect to Venezuelans to compare what goes on in the United States to Venezuela. But again, he'll never move to Cuba or Venezuela. He likes New York City.
Right.
So he knows it's not that bad.
Right. From now on, listen, folks, please, from both debaters, I'll ask you to no longer address each other. Just address the question. No longer address her position.
The question also was stripped to Venezuela.
No, that's fine. Let's move on. After Jane's question, let's go to...
Just exposes her further.
Please take it away. We have another question right there. Right there.
Thank you. My question to both participants is, what gives a country a right to national self-determination?
All right, who wants to take it first?
I'll take it. I think all countries have the right to self-determination. The issue in Venezuela is that Venezuelans have lost that right. They voted last year in a dictatorship, so against all odds, they managed to win that election. They managed to prove that fraud, and then Maduro wouldn't leave. Again, the fraud was so blatant that people, like some people that engage in propaganda will defend it, but even Gustavo Petro and Lula could not sign on to it. That shows you how Venezuelans have lost the right to determination. I would like for them to get it back, but they can't do it alone. Citizens can't go against a regime that controls institutions, the military, the prisons. So Venezuelans have lost that right, and we would like it back.
Same comment, same question. Max?
She just said Venezuelans have lost the right to self-determination. No, Venezuelans will never lose the right to self-determination because every person, every nation has the right to sovereignty under the United Nations Charter, okay? We can't just invalidate that and go to the rule of the jungle and allow Donald Trump and Marco Rubio to determine who gets to be toppled and who doesn't. The Ecuadorian last election was likely stolen by Daniel Noboa. The Honduran election was stolen in 2017 by Juan Orlando Hernandez, and the US immediately recognized it because he was their guy. He was a narco lord, but he was their narco lord. Donald Trump just said that the Honduran election may have just been stolen. Elections are stolen all across the hemisphere and all across the world, and this does not invalidate nations' right to sovereignty. It does not change the fact that unilateral sanctions are a form of economic terrorism that have been imposed on Venezuela since well before this election that you question. In fact, when Hugo Chavez was stomping the opposition at the polls, the radical Venezuelan opposition that was created out of whole cloth by CIA cutouts like the National Endowment for Democracy, of which your family is a part, was calling him a dictator and calling for violence. In fact, in a 2007 interview with Miami New Times, one person named Patricio Poleo called for violence to dislodge Hugo Chavez. So that violates not just people's human rights, but it also violates the sovereignty of Venezuela enshrined in the UN Charter that every country should enjoy.
All right, thank you. Let's take another question. Right here.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually a congressional candidate running in the Bronx myself, so it's very possible I'll be in the Congress next year. Because my opponent sucks. His name is Richard Torres.
The question.
Sorry. Often it's said that the intervention in Venezuela and in other countries as well is motivated not just solely on controlling resources, but trying to tackle the influence of the BRICS, specifically China, Russia, India, South Africa, and Brazil, right? That there's a growing opposition to Western dominance. My question to both speakers is, how do you see the influence that this BRICS and plus other nations now presents itself? Is it a viable threat, and is that why the United States is trying to control countries like Venezuela? And is this part of the same playbook as we see with Taiwan to China, Ukraine to Russia, and now Venezuela next in line?
Thank you. All right, who would like to take it first? Max, do you want to answer the question, please?
Well, that's a major factor in why Donald Trump has called for a full-on attack on BRICS. The United States is trying to forestall the coming of a multipolar world where nations have the ability to call on allies, to call on economic allies to be a part of Belt and Road, and it creates an economic competitor to the United States, which sometimes the US can't match. For example, when China came in with a massive infrastructure project in Peru, and Tony Blinken came down with some used up surplus Caltrans trains to try to match that, it was kind of embarrassing. Another factor here is that while Venezuela's economy has been suffering enormously under sanctions and many other factors, the last 4 years have started to see some growth, and Venezuela has started to recover its oil production capacity. And this can't be allowed to happen. If Venezuela comes out of sanctions, then what happens if it starts to export more energy to Cuba and answers Cuba's energy crisis? This is one of the major objectives of Marco Rubio and his little sectarian clique down in Doral, is to actually take out Venezuela so they can march back into Cuba and turn it into what it was before Fidel Castro, someone I'm sure you really hate, came into power, when it was basically run by a bunch of foreign gangsters like Meyer Lansky and a US-friendly dictator who was based Fulgencio Batista, who was sort of like Maria Corina Machado in a suit. When Cuba was a base for sex trafficking, playground for Americans who wanted to exploit young Latin American women, and a playground for the US Navy. That's what they want to turn it back into. And Marco Rubio, that will be his life's greatest achievement, just like Benjamin Netanyahu toppling the government of Iran. And they're willing to do anything it takes. They also have said they want to topple the government in Nicaragua. And I can tell you what will happen there if they manage to install these procedural liberal democracy governments where no one from the left is actually allowed to run, is you will see deep cartel penetration. There is no MS-13 right now in Nicaragua. You will see a massive increase in gun violence. Nicaragua has some of the lowest rates of gun violence in the Western Hemisphere, and you will see massive waves of migration continuing to the north. Just go back and look at the history of Colombia and how we helped spark a civil war there.
Thank you. Same question if you want to comment.
So aside from all the other topics that he brought in, I actually think we agree on that one. And I am against the Trump administration's political cover of going after Venezuela because of the drug issue. Because the reality is that most of the fentanyl is not coming from Venezuela, and that is a political cover for what's really the concern, which is Venezuela serving as a base for China, Russia, and Iran. So on that we agree. Unlike Max, I think that is a bad thing that China, Russia, and Iran are in our hemisphere. And I agree, if Venezuela were able to become free, the oil industry would recover, and that would mean oil prices would come down, and that would bring all other countries like Russia they will take the advantage that they have now. So Venezuelan democracy in every way, 1,000%, is not good for Russia, China, and Iran getting more power. You are right. And I don't want them to get more power. And that's what I believe.
Thank you. Let's take another question.
One of the buyers, please. She didn't answer the question, please.
Let's take another question.
You want to call someone or?
Yeah, right there. It's fine.
Hi, yeah. My question is for the proposition. I was wondering if the proposition could name a single country, a single oil-rich country in the past 20 years where U.S. intervention has led to a better outcome for the citizens of that country.
Well, he was smart to say oil producing because most of those are in the Middle East and they have a completely different context than Venezuela. So that was very smart wording. I cannot name one. But I can name others who are in Venezuela's region and more similar despite the oil, like Panama, like Colombia, which actually U.S. intervention in Colombia was not a failure. That ended up with a peace agreement, and Colombia is now way better off than it was 30 years ago. So no, I cannot name an oil-producing nation, but I can name nations that are similar to Venezuela in background, in culture, and do not have religious conflicts like oil-producing nations in the Middle East.
If you want a quick comment, or we can go to another
That was
question.
just an attack.
Let's go to another question.
Colombia is not an oil-producing country?
The U.S. didn't invade Colombia. The U.S. didn't invade Colombia.
It did have military operations of backup, intelligence, and it trained people in Colombia. And if you heard
My consent.
She was talking about the region. Let's take another question.
Let's talk about, I would love to talk about
Okay, right
Colombia.
there. Another question. Yeah, and then.
Good evening. My name is Costas. I became New Yorker, and the issue is it's quite complicated for me because I don't know many of the facts and issues you're talking about. But the way I understood Max's introduction is that he's against the war, and I'm a refugee. I was a refugee of the Greek Civil War. By the way, American government tested Nepal.
Sorry, sir, just get to the question, please.
Yeah, that's the question. Okay, So I have a lot of personal issue. I think whoever wants, and I don't want to go into a linguistic engineering here. It's not military intervention, it's a war. And I think whoever proposes and is for the war, it's a criminal. Okay, this is not a liberation war. Okay, and I'm a New Yorker. That's why I said that. You know, here in New York, I'm a teaching artist. Department of Education data in public schools says there's 100,000 New York City homeless children. Okay, I think it should be a war against the poverty of children of New York City, not going to the war in Venezuela. And whoever promotes, I'm sorry, please, I think it's criminal what you're doing. So my question is, what can you do? And this is for, I'm sorry.
Money, yes?
Yes, the question, okay, how you want to solve the problem of American New Yorker kids here?
Okay. Should we be prioritizing Venezuela when people here?
I think that's a fair argument. If you're a US voter, you would rather your government focus on New York City, that's fine. My argument is that in the long term, not acting in Venezuela will be more costly than not. But I respect your opinion. I think those issues are important. I'm not an expert in New York City and I can't go farther than that.
All right, we have two more questions there, back and back.
Since the matter of whether the U.S. should intervene militarily in Venezuela rests upon the assumption, right, that Venezuela is a tyranny, all these human rights violations are happening, you know, I would like to ask both of you, I think I already know Hermania's answer, but do you think that Venezuela is a democracy? And similarly, do you think that Russia, China, and similar countries are those democracies or are those dictatorships, Max?
Thank you for your question. Max, take it away.
Venezuela, the question is, am I Zoran Mondani? And I am not. I know. Develop a sense of humor, please. And the term dictator is so fungible and is so easily used to justify, along with terrorists and narco, criminal U.S. interventions that actually produce worse, more tyrannical forms of control. And the worst dictatorship in the world is the one in Washington, which seeks to control every single society and tell them what system to have. So how can we even call Venezuela a democracy? Well, why did the opposition win so many governor's races over the years? Why did the opposition get control of the National Assembly, then refuse to participate in vote recounts over, for example, vote buying scandals in Amazonia? Why was Juan Guaido the fakest president on the planet who, like, no one had ever heard of, who was recognized as president by Mike Pompeo? Why was he? I know you're not used to hearing this. You should stay home if you can't hear other sides and not come.
Let's continue with you.
Why is Juan Guaido allowed to ride around on the back of a motorcycle campaigning and then wage a military coup after being sent to taken into Colombia to wage a aid intervention by Los Rastrojos, a notorious narco cartel? He was allowed to come back to Venezuela and continue riding around. Why is Maria Corina Machado not in some kind of gulag? Why is this happening? Why haven't either of you been to jail? Why haven't either of you been to jail? I've been to jail in my own country for my political activism, and you know why? Because their repugnant opposition element falsely accused me of assault for simply being outside the Venezuelan embassy when they took it over in one of the most anti-democratic maneuvers in the violation of the Vienna Conventions. They falsely accused me of assaulting a 55-year-old woman who was pregnant. 6 months later, the Trump administration executed this phony warrant. My house was surrounded by police in a SWAT-style raid, and I was taken to prison to experience democratic privilege, along with all of the black youth who have really benefited from the drug war that's now being weaponized against Venezuela. I'm not your Zoran Mondani. I'm not running for mayor. I'm not running for any office. I'm going to just tell the goddamn truth like I see it.
please,
I
same
mean,
question
this feels
is Venezuela
pointless by
and
now,
democracy.
but Max makes a living saying the things you
Just
guys
on the
have heard him
question, on the
say.
question.
Of course, Venezuela is a dictatorship, and the United States is not a dictatorship. That's why Max can be here saying all the things that he's saying. Why am I not in jail? Because I had to leave my country when I was 11 years old, and all of my family would be in jail. And if I was there saying the things I'm saying, I too would be in jail. I wouldn't have the privilege that Max has. You can say whatever you want, and you do. You make a living criticizing the U.S., and you're free to do that. And that's the difference between the United States government that you try to compare with a real dictatorship.
Next question right there, gentleman with the big beard.
Hi there. So I was wondering, what is or should be the role of Israel in all of this?
You don't have to answer any question.
The role of Israel in this is it's used by propagandists to make every other issue about Israel and Palestine. In Venezuela, our priority is not Israel or Palestine. We are focused on our issue, and Israel plays no game in this. They like to bring up, I know Maria Corina Machado said things about Israel, and so we shouldn't support Maria Corina Machado and Venezuelan freedom. The issue is not about Israel, so I have nothing to say about that.
I didn't bring up
comment,
Israel.
Max, then next question.
The Venezuelan opposition brought up Israel by waving Israeli flags at its rallies. Every Venezuelan opposition figure, Borges, Machado, Leopoldo Lopez, Guaido, they all love Israel. They see Israel as their guiding light. And so have you, based on your tweets supporting Israel, showing solidarity with a country that committed the Holocaust of our time, which discredits you on the question of human
You're
rights.
still lying about this tweet, and
No, I'm talking about other tweets like your tweet.
other tweets, not the one that you chose to print. That's clearly a journalist
Right,
trying to find
do you want me
sources.
let's move on to another question.
Do you want me to quote your other tweets? I make a living doing this.
Let's move on to another question. We have someone from the Bronx High School who's here with us. Thank you to the Bronx High School for sending their students. He's a high schooler, so please take it away.
Hi, good afternoon. So when I came into this debate, I wasn't the most informed about the war in Venezuela. And I walked in here expecting a reason why I should care that Venezuela is such a corrupt country. Like, why should, as an American, right? Why should it matter to me, and why should my tax dollars go to another country when I'm living in my school and my students and my fellow students are getting deported? And when I'm in my school and there's water fountains that are not working, when I'm walking by my house and I'm afraid I may get shot. I mean, why does this have to be the case? Why? I mean, you talk about corruption, but who is funding our politicians? You're acting as if the U.S. is the safe haven and we need to save everybody. No, we don't. And the U.S. literally is probably.
Finish your question.
Yeah, my question is, why should I care? Like, why should me and my mom's tax dollars go to Venezuela?
Yeah,
wow.
Thank you very much.
That's fair enough, and of course, arguing that the U.S., when it's going through so many issues, should care about Venezuela, it's not an easy task because the U.S. is not perfect, and I'm not saying that it is, particularly what's going on right now. And it is hard for Americans who are struggling to see why they should care, especially because these are long-term effects. The Venezuelan tragedy started 26 years ago, but we're not really seeing the criminality that comes out of that system until now. Similarly, as I mentioned before, aside from the 8 million migrants that have destabilized the region, the presence of foreign tyrannical powers like Russia, China, and Iran do represent a threat to the U.S. in the long run in the case of a potential conflict. So in the long run, people should care. But I understand that it's hard for you to see because you care about the issues right now, and I can understand that.
Okay.
Question can I quickly?
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
20 seconds.
In Hermania's opening presentation, one thing she said she said you should care was because Venezuela participated in a plot, according to the U.S. federal government, in which Iran's IRGC would kidnap Masih Alinejad, who is a U.S. government employee who makes a living advocating for, well, she was a Voice of America employee. That's just a fact.
and she was advocating for regime change in Iran. According to her, we should care because Venezuela was going to supply fast boats to take her from Brooklyn all the way to Venezuela after Iran kidnapped her, skirting the Coast Guard, and they were going to get like 1,500 miles away through the Caribbean, through Southcom, and that was the plot, and we're supposed to believe that, and that's why you should care and stop caring about ICE. ICE is giving you democratic privilege.
Right, so a question we have from our online audience. To Max, how can we enforce our sovereignty if citizens' votes are not respected, where there is also no freedom of speech and separation of power?
Well, we need to organize, and that's why I still stay in the United States. I don't leave. I stay here because I was born here. This is my country. My family's here. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I actually grew up in a neighborhood where I saw the crack epidemic basically take over as the CIA was working to import drugs into our communities to fund its black operations in Central America. And it was really painful for me. And it showed me kind of what apartheid was like on a small scale. So I care about this country. Why should I go to Cuba? Why are you telling me to go to Cuba? Will you go back to Venezuela if the opposition takes over and civil war breaks out? I mean, come on. So we are going to struggle here, and we need to form bipartisan coalitions, work with people on the other side to do things like, for example, a campaign to register AIPAC as a foreign agent. And we need to take on, and when it comes to this war, we need to take on the Miami Mafia that's taking this country into a disastrous war.
Same question.
That doesn't represent us.
Same question. Question about sovereignty.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I got lost with all the crack epidemic.
How can we enforce our sovereignty if citizens' votes are not respected?
That old silly
There's
crack
also
Not as silly as the Venezuelan tragedy to you guys.
no freedom of speech and no separation of power. You can take this question as both targeted on Venezuela or the U.S. He took it as the U.S. You can take it on Venezuela.
Can you repeat? Sorry, he's not talking to me. Repeat it.
How can we enforce our sovereignty if citizens' votes are not respected, where there is also no freedom of speech and separation of power?
Well, I mean, that's what I've been talking about. The country does not exist once the people lose the opportunity to elect their leaders. And that's what's happening in Venezuela. Now, I know the other side calls democracy activists CIA shills. So people in Iran who ask for democracy, they're CIA agents, they're bad. These are people asking for democracy because they have lost their rights as citizens. They don't get to go and say whatever they want, to go wherever. In Iran, she didn't get to show her hair, but according to the other side, that's just CIA propaganda. So in countries like Venezuela and Iran, there is no sovereignty. There is no country if citizens do not have the right to choose their own fate, and that's the difference.
What about Saudi Arabia?
No comments from the audience, please. If you want, raise your hand and ask a question. All right, let's take another question. We have one right there, Casey. You should see him at far. He's with the curly hair all the way in the back. Yeah, next is guy with the hat.
Hi. Two quick questions for the pro-intervention side. So first off,
one question each, please.
They're very quick, tangible questions. So first, what do you actually want the specifics of the intervention? In regards to the sort of racism issue, my understanding of the noble savages myth is that it was used to promote intervention. So how can you say that the opposition is racist against Venezuelans, but simultaneously doesn't want to intervene in their affairs?
Thank you for your question. Hermione, if you want to take it first.
The noble savage myth has changed, and now if you talk to Venezuelans, Iranians, Nicaraguans, we use it because when we go online, we get a crowd like you guys, right? We're asking for democracy, and we get called CIA shills. I get told that I'm not really Venezuelan because I can't speak English. So in our communities, that's what the noble savage means. What was the first question?
On how the military intervention.
Oh, right. So I'm not a military expert, but I think, like I said, an operation with exiled military members, community leaders, would have to be included. So I would think that targeted strikes, I know, terrible thing to say to this crowd, would be the way to go instead of a full-on boots-on-the-ground operation. So targeted strikes and peacekeeping missions, to be precise.
Thank you, Max. The same two questions. If you'd like to comment.
Just two quick points. We got the broad panoply of questions. Iran was targeted in an unprovoked assault by Israel, and this is just a fact. Mossad infiltrators were activated to carry out violence, including car bombings, assassinations, and spread terror all across Iran. And at one point, Israel targeted the Evin prison, which they considered to be a symbol of Iran's tyrannical regime, and they thought that this would cause riots to come out of and a democratic uprising to come out in the street. And the opposite happened, because the Israeli strike killed scores of prisoners, it killed social workers, it killed family members who were visiting prisoners, and someone named Narges Mohammadi, who is a major Iran regime change activist, very active on the issue of the hijab, which many women do not wear in the open in cities like Tehran and Isfahan today. She condemned that strike, and Iranians, including those with great issues against the Islamic Revolution, rallied around the flag against these terrorist attacks, which were capped by the US bombing Iran and attacking it for simply having a nuclear program in the works, not even having weapons. This will happen, this could very well happen in Venezuela too, if the US attacks and people see, common Venezuelans see the savagery of these attacks, just as Panamanians saw when there were mass graves littered across Panama during the US intervention to remove former CIA asset Manuel Noriega, and the neighborhood of El Chorrillo, filled with Afro-Panamanians, was totally destroyed. Its residents were put in internment camps for months, and one of the most unpopular governments in Panamanian history was placed in power. So people wake up when they're attacked, and they don't always move in the direction you think they're gonna go, from quote-unquote targeted strikes, where the smart bombs only supposedly kill Chavistas. And one very quick point, 15 seconds, on Venezuelan democracy or the lack thereof, and I don't deny that there are some serious problems with the political system there when they're basically at war. There is an opposition figure named Henry Falcone, I think he was the governor of Lara State, and he was sanctioned by the United States for seeking to run for governor. They personally sanctioned him. Why would they sanction someone in the opposition? Because Falcone is part of the patriotic opposition that opposes sanctions, that opposes financial terror and intervention. So those figures, according to the US, are not allowed to exist in Venezuela. They only want the radical putschist opposition to exist. And now that putschist opposition only has about 15% approval rating, according to the data analysis poll that I cited earlier.
Thank you. I'll use quickly my moderator's prerogative and ask a question. Hermania, question for you. On the note that Max mentioned about Iran, we saw a galvanization of support around the central regime after the 12-day war. What are your thoughts on a scenario where this happens, like some form of a military intervention actually encourages and strengthens Maduro's base of support?
Anyone who honestly understands what's going on in Venezuela, despite the data that Max is citing, knows that Venezuelans want to get rid of Maduro. Even Chavistas who like Chavez.
Let her finish, please. Continue.
So this is something that would be different than in places like Libya or Syria. There are not different factions fighting for power in Venezuela. If the regime was removed, again, we elected a government that would take its place, not placed by the US. Venezuelans voted for it. The actual data from outside Venezuela says that Venezuelans would support an intervention. It's hard to get this data in dictatorships. You should at least accept this when people are afraid to speak out. Especially in a place like Venezuela, where people are afraid to like posts. I know Venezuelans in Venezuela. They message me saying, I support this message, but I'm scared of liking it, because after the elections, the regime is checking people's phones. So I do not believe it would be a similar situation. Again, we don't have a religious conflict. It's a different situation, and the situation is not as divided in so many different factions.
A quick comment from you, Max, if you'd like.
Are there more questions?
Yes, I have a question for you as well, as moderator's prerogative. I get to ask you a question. So John Quincy Adams, our 6th president, the man who famously wrote the speech about the U.S. not going abroad in search of monsters to destroy, he himself wrote the Monroe Doctrine, positing that our hemisphere is ours, and we control everything in it. We control the major powers in it. Venezuela is in our hemisphere, just as Ukraine is in the Russian hemisphere, just as Taiwan is in the Chinese hemisphere. Venezuela is playing games with the Russians, with the Chinese. Venezuela is threatening to invade Guyana. Why shouldn't it be, in a realist perspective, in our interest to just show up and just topple Maduro and use massive, awesome force to topple him if we can do it?
Well, I should also mention John Quincy Adams was one of the few members of Congress who voted against the resolution giving Polk the power to invade Mexico. So John Quincy Adams would be standing here with us against this criminal war today, I'm sure of it, as would Abraham Lincoln. The Monroe Doctrine has been always the standard operating procedure, both for democratic administrations which seek to do it through what George Kennan would call fostering middle-class revolutions in place of proletariat revolutions, or the Republican Party through the figure of John Bolton, who simply said our foreign policy is in Monroeist policy. And it has produced disaster for the Western Hemisphere, whereas cooperation would actually benefit the United States. I don't understand why we don't try it instead of picking, you mentioned Guyana, picking sides on the Essequibo oil fields, which when we're clearly acting on behalf of ExxonMobil. That's clearly what we're doing. So who's actually benefiting from the Monroe Doctrine? Who benefited from the Banana Wars? Who benefited from the Marine invasion of Nicaragua? Who benefited from the US taking over Cuba when it was about to become independent? Who benefited from Panama being stolen from Colombia? Who benefits from the US potentially attacking Mexico at a time when Mexico is beginning to flourish under a popular center-left, non-dictatorial government, as I'm sure you'd call it? Who benefits? It's just the rich. It's just the oligarchy in this country, which dictates everything, according to a 2013 Princeton poll, which showed that the bottom 97% have almost no power in our politics. So the Monroe Doctrine is a doctrine of the rich, by the rich, for the rich, that has produced catastrophe in our country. And I think we can point directly to the migration crisis as one of the results of it.
All right, now I ask you to both take out your pens and take notes, because we're going to take 3 more questions, and we'll ask you to address them in your closing remarks. So the first came from our audience online. Thank you to all those tuning in. Question for both. Should there not be an intervention, what would be the other plausible route for the resolution of the conflict or the situation in Venezuela, considering dialogues and concessions have already been made and broken? That's question number 1, so take notes. And then we had one more. Yep, one more question right there. Yep, go ahead. Keep it brief, please.
I'll keep it very brief. It's great that you brought up the Monroe Doctrine, because this question has to do with a historical figure that was born in Venezuela. The word is now Hugo Chavez Hermania. It's gonna be, I'm gonna talk about Simón Bolívar. Basically, what do both of you, Max Blumenthal, Hermania, think of Simón Bolívar, El Libertador, his vision, and how it has to do with today?
All right, we have the first question on the path forward without intervention. Second question on Simón Bolívar in Gran Colombia. We have a question there. Casey, we'll take this one and then the one right behind you, Casey.
So this is mostly for Armenia. So you cite human rights abuses as in Venezuela, and you talk about self-determination. But also, if we look at the record of what's happening right now, we see that the U.S. is engaging in extrajudicial killings in the Caribbean that is related to this. So when we talk about democracy, how do you reconcile that? And reconcile that our liberal allies are not sharing information with the Trump administration for this very reason?
All right, and then just the last question there with the person that stands. Yeah.
Right, thank you very much. I'm from Venezuela. I came here around 30 years ago, after the Caracazo. And hundreds of people were killed during the Caracazo. And there was no Chavez, no Maduro in power. So my question is very easy. Why the United States is so focused on Venezuela and is talking always about democracy in Venezuela, and no one here is talking about what's happening in Peru. In Peru's president was elected, an indigenous president, campesino, was elected, was removed from power, and 100 of campesinos have been killed, and we don't see anything in the media. Why is the difference that you can see here? Why Venezuela is so important? Why Peru is so important? Why Ecuador is so important? Why Haiti is not so important?
Okay. Thank you all for the excellent questions. It's been a pleasure moderating this Q&A segment. So with that said, Germania, you have 5 minutes for your closing remarks if you'd like to take the podium. Just try to address as many of the questions as you can, and take it away. You have 5 minutes. The cues will be in front of you.
I'm just going to address the questions because I don't think there's a point in telling this crowd the arguments that I had prepared. But some of my closing statement was part of the first question, which is the possible routes aside from military intervention. The reality here is that Venezuelans have tried everything. We have protested, we have gone to elections in dictatorship, we have negotiated, we have had European leaders moderate more conversations. This has gone on for 26 years. We don't want a war. Nobody wants a war. We're trying to stop the killing, exiling, jailing, starving of 28 million unarmed Venezuelans. Possible other routes would be continuing sanctions, but even the anti-war crowd doesn't support sanctions, which are supposed to be the diplomatic route. So I would like to hear what he thinks about that. On Simón Bolívar, that's an interesting one. I do think Simón Bolívar was kind of I'll use their language, colonizer's kid, and his idea for independence was not really about what Venezuela is today, but would have Gran Colombia been a better counterweight to other powers in the world? Maybe that would have been a better option and we wouldn't be here today. On the US, extrajudicial killings, I actually have an issue with that, as I mentioned before. I would rather the US government was clear with what's going on, do it congressionally, be clear about what they're really going after, which is not these drug boats. It is what we spoke about. Venezuela serving as a base for enemies of the US. This also goes into the last question. The US does bad things. Bad things happen in Peru, bad things happen in Ecuador, Mexico, other countries. Why do we care about Venezuela? I agree bad things happen in all these other countries. However, I believe that Donald Trump will leave office by the time his term is done. I think in Peru, they are pretty good at getting rid of their presidents and overthrowing them. And that is the difference. In Venezuela, we have not been able to elect our leaders for a generation now. And that is the difference of an imperfect democracy and maybe one that's in particular trouble, like I think the US one is, and an actual dictatorship where there are no elections and the leaders simply don't leave. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Max, please take your podium. You have 5 minutes for your closing remarks.
Thank you, and tough crowd. I would not want to be in in front of a crowd that was on the other side. So everyone give Hermione a round of applause. There's a lot of people watching online too, and we don't know who they are. Maybe they're all bots. I don't know. There was a question about Peru. We've witnessed not just military coups that have been carried out with the support of the U.S., but parliamentary coups, and that's what I believe took place in Peru, where the first indigenous president, Pedro Castillo, a former educator, was elected, and Diana Boluarte just simply replaced him. Now he's on his way to jail, am I correct? And the U.S. has no problem with that. So, I'm here to call out the hypocrisy. There are, even if we were to accept that Venezuela is a dictatorship that has been bureaucratized and securitized over years and years of political warfare, hybrid warfare, that has even seen the U.S. attack its main power station, proudly with Marco Rubio announcing that the US is going to destroy the power station with an attack back in 2019, 2 hours before it happened. Even if we accept that, there are other countries that we can define as dictatorships, and we're not going to attack them all. And also, we're not going to pretend that our country is this shining city on the hill and that we can just sit here on our hands and be complacent when we are controlled by a national security state and a financial oligarchy which will not allow us to bring our own people into Congress, let alone to even participate in a presidential debate if we oppose their stranglehold on power. We live in a duopoly that is actually the perfect dictatorship. So let's recognize that. And let's recognize the inspiring model of Simon Bolivar. I have a painting of him on my wall. He's an American. He's a true American. And he was a son of privilege. I believe he was a slave owner who came to identify with the slaves. And he came to identify with the poor llaneros. Hugo Chavez was a llanero later on. And he led them into battle against the Spanish Royal Army in 1823 in the Battle of Carabobo, one of the most inspiring battles, and smashed the Spanish Royal Army. And this struck a powerful blow back in Spain in support of pro-democracy forces there. And so let this be our Battle of Carabobo as we confront the empire, because what happens there doesn't stay there. And we need to affirm one simple truth. Regime change begins at home. Thank you.
All right, well, I want to thank both of you for a spirited debate. I really hope everyone who's watching, both in person and online, learned something about the situation we're in. Hermania, 1 second. We will do brief announcements as people vote. Thank you. And let me welcome Jean Epstein onto the stage. As you take out your phones, scan the QR code, give us your vote for the post-debate tally. Jean will make some announcements about the upcoming events.